Hey guys, DC Network here, coming at you with another video. What if Cartoon Network owned Danny Phantom? How could have the show been different? What would have stayed the same? Well, if we look at Danny Phantom, if you don't know already, it's a show that ran on Nickelodeon from 2004 to 2007. Its genre is an action show and has very similar vibes to Ben 10, being that it's about a young boy, in this case Danny Phantom, who's 14 years old, who has a secret superpower that he can turn into a ghost. And he has to keep this superpower hidden from the rest of the world, similarly to how Ben 10 in the original series and in Alien Force keeps his alien transformations hidden from the rest of the world. So, how could Danny Phantom have been different if it was owned by Cartoon Network? First off, I would just like to say that Danny Phantom is a great show, and I want to look at what they could have done different in the show itself. Now, in the first two seasons, Danny Phantom, I would say, had too many of the same villains recurring over and over again as the main plot points of certain episodes. For example, Skulker. In season 1, he's the main villain for 3 of the episodes, and the season only consists of 20 episodes. He's not the only villain who appears as the main antagonist for more than one episode in a given season. I mean, yeah, it's okay if you do this for 1 or 2 villains, but I think in the first season, there's under 10 villains that are the main antagonists of certain episodes, and there's 20 episodes in this season. I think that's a bit ridiculous, honestly. On the contrary, when you look at season 3, there's 12 episodes, and I think there are 4 new villains introduced in that season, maybe even 5. And to be honest, I think that many of these villains are forgettable, such as Voltrex I don't like at all. Amorpho I like as a one and off villain that he never returns as the main antagonist again, and then there's Overgrowth, who I think is a pretty cool villain, but again, kind of one that shouldn't be appearing too often in the series. Now, if Cartoon Network had owned Danny Phantom, what I hope they would do is something similar to Ben 10, how for certain characters, certain villains, they appear often like Vilgax, like Kevin Levin, but then for other villains, they just appear as a one and off type thing, similar to how Amorpho is in Danny Phantom. But what else would have happened to Danny Phantom if it was owned by Cartoon Network? Well, first off, I think that they would have started a toy line similar to how Ben 10 had its huge toy line for Bandai for many years, and now with Playmates Toys. I think it's a huge missed opportunity that Nickelodeon didn't make a toy line for Danny Phantom. There are so many different gadgets that the Phantons make, so many different ghosts that are in the show that could have been made into toys and adapted into playsets and whatnot. I am actually comprising a list right now of all the different merchandise opportunities they could have had and what I think they should have done. If you guys want to see that list, leave a comment down in the comment section below, and I will upload that list to either a new video or this video when it's ready. Now, obviously, this toy line would have bringing in a lot more money to the network, so this could have created a big franchise around Danny Phantom, similar to how a franchise was built around Ben 10. Ben 10, obviously, as we all know, had Ben 10, Ben 10 Alien Force, Ultimate Alien, Omniverse, and the reboot. Similarly, I could see Danny Phantom being continued past its 3rd season and not being cancelled into a 4th and maybe 5th season, and later being adapted into another series, similar to how Butch Hartman has on his channel, Danny Phantom 10 years later. Honestly, I think Danny Phantom is just a huge missed opportunity for Nickelodeon. I feel like if it was in the hands of the old Cartoon Network, it would have done a lot better than it did, and there would have been a lot more merchandise and around the show, and they could have built a franchise out of it. All in all, I think if Butch Hartman sold the rights of Danny Phantom to Cartoon Network instead of selling it to Nickelodeon, I think this show would have been turned into a franchise with a huge toy line that could have brought in millions to Cartoon Network. Also, I think Cartoon Network would have added a wide variety of villains to the show, maybe even making an overarching plot to some of the episodes, because I feel like Danny Phantom at some points of the show, it gets a little bit strange to me. Like, for example, I've said season 3, there are a lot of new villains brought in that could have been brought in during season 2 when I think there were too many villains returning. Because, for example, in season 2, the only 2 new villains were Youngblood and the Ghost King, who only appeared in 1 episode. And where you have season 3, where there aren't that many recurring villains in the show. I feel like Cartoon Network, if they had owned Danny Phantom, would have spaced out these new villains throughout the series, and maybe even make it into an overarching plot developing for some of the villains or whatnot. Similarly to how in Ben 10, Cartoon Network made it so that Vilgax, he was only in the show sporadically, but when he was in the show, there was an overarching plot developing with him that would, have a big blowout at the end of the series, which I think would have been cool to see in Danny Phantom. Overall, I feel like Danny Phantom would have been on for a lot longer if it had been owned by Cartoon Network, and I think it would have brought in a lot more revenue if it had been run by Cartoon Network due to merchandise sales and probably a longer run and maybe even the start of a franchise. Don't get me wrong, do I think it would have been as big as Ben 10? No. I don't think it would have gone on for over 10 years. I think the show could have had a really good run for maybe 6, 7, or even 8 years. Which, of course, during this time, it would have been Danny Phantom, then maybe something like Danny Phantom 10 years later. Anyways, let me know in the comment section below if you wish Cartoon Network was the original owner for Danny Phantom and not Nickelodeon. Also, before I sign off, I want to ask you guys if you liked this video and would like to see other shows looked at to see what would have been different if they were owned by Cartoon Network instead of whatever respective network they were owned by. If you guys like this video enough and would like to see more of them, please let me know because I can make this into a mini series on my channel. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you guys next time.